Today, we're diving into a really powerful question, one that kind of shakes the very foundation of our justice system. We like to think of the law as this objective, impartial, blind force. But what if it's not? What if the whole legal system was actually built on a worldview that is fundamentally male? So let's get right into it. The big question we're tackling here is this: is the law truly neutral? Or was it shaped by men for men, basically making a male perspective the default for everyone? This is really the core of a feminist critique that's been going on for decades, and it forces us to look at justice in a completely different way. Okay, to really get this argument, we've got to go back in time a bit. Because the idea that the law has a gender problem, well, it's not new at all. For centuries, legal systems were pretty explicit about treating women as subordinate. And check out the date on this quote. This isn't from the 1970s feminist movement. This is from 1869. The philosopher John Stuart Mill was already calling out that the legal subordination of women was just plain wrong. I mean, think about it. At the time, many laws denied married women the right to own their own property, or even sign contracts. Their inferior legal status was literally written into the code. Now, to get a handle on this critique, we have to talk about a key term: patriarchy. In this context, it doesn't just mean rule by the father. It's talking about this bigger social system where men and masculine ways of being are seen as the norm, the default for what it means to be a fully human person. So the real question becomes, if a legal system is built inside a patriarchy, can it ever be truly neutral? And this had real-world consequences. For the longest time, criminology, the study of crime, just ignored women. And when it finally did start paying attention, it saw female offenders as doubly deviant. What does that mean? Well, it meant that, yeah, they broke the law, but they also broke the unwritten rules of how a woman is supposed to act. It shows just how deeply these gendered expectations were baked right into the study of crime and justice. So as we move into the late 20th century, these older critiques start to evolve into something much sharper, a more direct challenge to the law itself. And right at the heart of this new wave was the British sociologist and criminologist Carol Smart. You can actually see her thinking develop over time. In 1976, her book Women, Crime, and Criminology just blew the doors open. She basically argued that the entire field was completely blind to women's experiences. But then, by 1989, she takes it a huge step further. With Feminism and the Power of Law, she's not just critiquing a field of study anymore. She's asking whether the law itself could ever really be a tool for women's liberation. And that brings us to the core of the modern debate, which is really a central conflict inside feminism. When you're faced with a legal system that seems biased, what do? Do you try to use it to create change? Or do you see the whole thing as a trap? So here are the two main strategies, side by side. On one hand, you've got the reformist approach. This side sees the law as a tool. And hey, it's been used to win absolutely crucial victories, right? The right to vote, equal pay laws. The goal here is to work inside the system to make it better. But then you have Carol Smart's side. She called the law a siren call. From the myth? It seems appealing, but it's really a trap. She argued that to even use the law, you have to speak its language, a language of objectivity, of precedent that was created without women's perspectives. By doing that, you risk having women's actual lived experiences dismissed or invalidated because the law claims to be the only truth. So for her, the goal wasn't to reform the law, it was to decenter it, to resist its power and build alternatives. So, how do you solve a problem like that? It's a huge dilemma. Well, in recent years, a really fascinating new strategy has popped up, one that tries to engage with the law's power without, falling into its traps. It's called the Feminist Judgments Project. And the way it works is pretty cool. First, a group of feminist legal scholars picks a real case that's already been decided. Second, and this is the important part, they act like judges and write a brand new judgment. But they can only use the laws and precedents that were available at the time of the original decision. They're not making up new laws, they're using the existing toolkit. And finally, they publish this missing feminist judgment to show how the very same case could have been decided differently. And this is not just some academic thought experiment. There are real projects in the UK, Canada, and Australia putting this theory into practice. What they show so powerfully is that legal reasoning isn't always some fixed objective thing. It involves choices. And if you make different choices, you can get to a totally different but still legally valid conclusion. It's a way of challenging the law from the inside on its own terms. So, where does all of this leave us? Well, this debate between using the law and resisting it is far from over. In fact, it's one of the most important conversations happening in legal theory today. And really, it comes back to these two powerful competing ideas. Do we listen to Carol Smart's call to decenter the law, to build power somewhere else entirely? Or do we follow the path of the feminist judgments projects and try to, I guess, deconstruct the system from within? Using the master's tools not to build the master's house, but to try and redesign it. Ultimately, this whole thing boils down to one fundamental question of strategy, and it applies to way more than just the courtroom. When you come up against a system that you believe is flawed, is it better to work within its rules to try and force change? Or should you step outside of it completely and try to build something new? There's really no easy answer, and that's exactly what makes it a question worth asking.